لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما وفقها في الدين يا رب العالمين. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. We start inshallah tonight a subject that we have been alhamdulillah trying to have a lot of introductions and preludes to. And I said when we were studying the time of Bani Umayyah, of the Umayyads and the times of the Abbasids, that a lot of these political events and what is a dry subject really at the time. And alhamdulillah, I appreciate everybody's patience during that time. It was more like a history, really dry history lesson and just recitation of events. But we will inshallah make the connection now into this subject. And this subject is very important, and what we're going to start today, inshallah, is the lives of the great 4 Imams. And some aspects of the lives of the great 4 Imams, as known to the people of the Sunnah, are Imam Abu Hanifah and Hammad ibn Thabit, and Muhammad, and Imam Malik ibn Anas, Imam Medina, Allah have mercy on him, and Muhammad ibn Idris al-Shafi'i, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And these are the Imams, the leaders, the teachers, the mentors of the great 4 schools of jurisprudence and thinking of Islamic Sharia. And just to start this subject is why are we studying the lives of these Imams? And why these Fiqh 4 initially, inshallah, we will try to study some more. But there is really the influence of these Imams on our life is undeniable. And their influence on our Islamic history and our thinking of our jurisprudence and the practice of everyday religion of Islam is undeniable. And even many, not only common groups, but the scholars of Islam give themselves connection to these people. And the scholar will say, I am a Hanafi scholar, I am a Shafi'i scholar, I am a Maliki scholar, I'm a Hanbali scholar. And many of the people that have their specialty in this and jurisprudence have really studied Jazakallah. Thank you very much. And they will connect themselves, and they have to study the knowledge of these Imams, or at least the schools of thought. Having said that, we will study the jurisprudence itself just in a very superficial. Number one, I'm not an expert on that. I'll never claim to be. And we just need to get an understanding of how these schools came to be. Why we have 4 schools, not 6, not 7, not 8. How many Imams were there, and why only these 4 schools became an actual reality in our understanding of our religion. Number one, it is important to know that there are many Imams of their times, and many of these Imams have their own schools, and they were well recognized by the scholars of the Sunni scholars as solid Imams with their own schools, like Imam al-Za'i, Imam al-Layth al-Sa'id, Imam al-Zahiri, al-Hasan al-Basri, al-Imam al-Nafa'i, al-Imam al-Shafi'i. Many of these are very well established schools of thought. However, the surviving schools, so to speak, or the schools that are actually practiced today are mostly these 4 schools. And we will try to study why is that. But the most important reason usually is you go back to the students of these Imams. The more active the students, the more established the students are, and then the political and the environment of the time that actually facilitated the spread of the special madhab made this madhab very common. To give you a quick example, and a lot of these things, inshallah, we will study in more detail. The madhab of Hanafi, for example, the Hanafi school of thought is probably the most widely spread school among the Muslims. And especially most of that happened during the Abbasi time. Why is that? What happened after the death of Imam Abu Hanifah is his most important student, so to speak, is Abu Yusuf Yaqub. And Abu Yusuf became Chief Justice in the court of Ma'mun. He became Qadi al-Qudat. He became the Chief Justice of the Abbasi Khilafah altogether. So whatever thought, whatever school Abu Yusuf had, became really the most dominant school of thought for the Abbasi dynasty, and for many, many years, and that really made the widespread of the Hanafi madhab. And we will speak about the other madhab. We will see in the time of the Shafi'i that madhab Shafi'i was the most commonly known madhab in Egypt. Imam Malik, some of his students went to Maghreb, North Africa, to the western part, and today the Maliki madhab is really the most commonly spread madhab in North Africa, in the western North African Sahara area. So a lot of that has to do with the students of the madhab. And then why only these four madhab? We will also try to study that a little later on, and that is because of the differences of opinions. And really, it can be crystallized into these four madhab. For example, Imam Abu Hanifah, his school of thought, is school known as madhab al-Ra'y, the school of opinion, the school of qiyas, the school of measure, one event to another. A lot of intellectual, a lot of not only depending on the hadith, but also having an opinion and how things go on what is the jurisprudence. And if you go to probably the other extreme, you go to Imam Malik and Imam Ahmad, and they are known as the school of naql, the school of copying, whatever the hadith is, whatever the school, whatever they have text that is coming from the Prophet or the Sahaba, or according to Imam Malik, what the people of Medina did. And to him that was also high in his sources of jurisprudence, would have high rank. None of the Imams would reject hadith. None of these Imams, it's important also to know that, none of these Imams would reject a solid hadith from the Prophet and said, my opinion is not that. And we will also study that. But they had certain criteria for accepting the hadith and then applying the hadith into their school of thought. Why should we study the lives of these Imams? Other than their influence on today's life and our understanding of our own religion, the lives of these Imams is really a role model now for us, really an example for people who seek knowledge. It's an example for people to know how to look at people of knowledge that follow on the track of these Imams. Seeking knowledge is one of the noblest, highest rewarded acts in our religion of Islam. And we will see how these Imams made themselves role models in sacrifice during their seeking of knowledge and during their lives as knowledgeable people. And then the many sacrifices that they had to go through and the tribulation. And it is well known the tribulation of Imam Abu Hanifah. And he was tortured at the end of his life. You imagine he's a 70-year-old person who's been tortured for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal had positions in Islam where many of the scholars said Islam owes to be transmitted to what it is today to two people. Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, when he had his position at the time of Ridda, and Ahmad ibn Hanbal, when he had his position at the time when the Mu'tazilites wanted to change this religion, and we will study that inshallah when we speak of the life of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. But out of these many reasons, really becomes very important for us to understand the lives, the history, the biography of these four Imams, how they came to their schools, why their schools became distinguished, and how their schools transmitted to actually become the essence, become the basis of how we learn our religion today. And inshallah today we'll start with the first of them. First of them, historically speaking. He is the first of the great four Imams in historical land, historical order. In the time of Imam Abu Hanifah al-Nu'man ibn Thabit ibn Nu'man radiallahu anhu. And to speak of Imam Hanifah, before I would like to tell you about my references, what I used to prepare for this study session. And the book that I really rely heavily on is one of the books that many of the modern people, especially in Sharia schools, read about this life of the Imam. And I'd like to ask Sheikh Masood, probably familiar with him, that is the work of Imam Muhammad Abu Zahra. A very well-known Imam. And let me tell you just a little bit about Imam Muhammad Abu Zahra. He was the chief of the section of Sharia in Al-Azhar. And he was born in Egypt in 1898 of the Common Era, which is 1316. And he had his Islamic education, traditional formal Islamic education in madrasa, in the kitab, like most people at that time, at the end of the Ottoman period, and then he went on to al-Azhar, and then he became a teacher in al-Azhar, and he continued to go up and rise to Islam until he became the head of the section of Sharia. Imam Muhammad al-Zahra is very well known among the scholars, and he wrote several books about the Imams. And he wrote a book about Imam Abu Hanifah, a book about Imam Malik, a book about Imam Shafi'i, a book about Imam Ahmad, and a book about Ibn Taymiyyah. And his work is really taught today in many of the Sharia schools, many of the religious schools, and it's very well authenticated, it's very well academically written. So that will be the reference that I'll inshallah use, and I don't know if there's actually an English copy of that, but I will search on that, and I would advise everyone to read that if possible. I don't know if Imam Mas'ud, that's what they use in al-Azhar or in many other schools today, even to teach the lives of these great Imams. So who is Abu Hanifah al-Nu'man? Who is Abu Hanifah, and where he was born, and what his life, how his life started? Abu Hanifah was born on the 80th year after the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ. And he was born in the city of Kufa in Iraq. And it is agreed upon that he died at the year 150 of the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ. So he was 70 years old when he passed, rahimahullah. And Abu Hanifah was born to a Persian family in Kufa. Kufa was the intellectual capital of Iraq at that time. It was a city that was established by Umar ibn Khattab after the conquest of Iraq and the conquest of Persia, and many of the people of the Persian Empire moved and settled into al-Basra and Kufa and many other new cities of the new territory at that time. And the father and the grandfather, actually, of Abu Hanifah al-Nu'man, was the first to settle in Kufa, and at that time it was the capital for Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu. The father of Abu Hanifah, who was Thabit ibn al-Nu'man, or in other narrations, Thabit ibn Zuti, he met with Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu, and Ali ibn Abi Talib radiallahu anhu prayed for the father of Abu Hanifah, and he prayed that he will be blessed in his offspring, be blessed in his children. And out of that, many in the scholars said out of that prayer came Abu Hanifah al-Nu'man radiallahu anhu. So, and his family originally is from the city of Kabul, which is the capital of Afghanistan today. And he was from a noble family in Kabul when they moved into Kufa. However, Abu Hanifah was born into this Muslim family of Persian roots. And the Umayyads at that time called the non-Arabs that come into the Arab world or the Muslim world at that time, they called them Mawali, and to distinguish them from the Arabs of that time. So he was from al-Mawali. And al-Mawali at that time, they were really the holders of knowledge at the age of Abu Hanifah al-Nu'man. And it is really what the Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith, an authentic hadith. This hadith is narrated in both Al-Bukhari and Muslim, that the Prophet ﷺ said, لو كان العلم معلقا عند الثريا لتداوله رجال من أبناء فارس. The Prophet ﷺ said in this authentic hadith, this knowledge is to be hanging in the stars, in the celestial skies. The people of Persia will bring it down. The people of Persia will get this knowledge down. And that is one of the miracles of the tradition of the Prophet ﷺ. We know not only the knowledge of jurisprudence and religion was developed by many people that came, many Muslim people that came from the area, but also the knowledge for medicine, like Ibn Sina, the knowledge of mathematics, like Al-Khwarizmi, who is very well known in advancing the knowledge of algorithms, algebra, and etc. So, Al-Nu'man ibn Thabit, or Abu Hanifah as he was known, was a Persian person, and he was a very knowledgeable person, and most of the scholars of the Islamic world at that time were of non-Arab descent. Although, this was relatively an early community. It's only 80 years after the hijrah of the Prophet ﷺ. Already the people that came into Islam from outside Arabia had become scholars. And many of the historians reflect on that, and they said some of the reason for that is most of the Arabs, as they went out of Arabia and they started conquering, they were busy with governing, they were busy with fighting and leading the armies and etc. And a lot of the job about knowledge was left to the people of the conquered territory and the people that went into Islam. Another thing that these people, the Persians and some of the Byzantines and many people of the Sindh, they were from great civilizations that were well established before Islam, and they had structures how to seek knowledge, how to acquire knowledge, and how to give knowledge. There's no denial of the Persian civilization at that time and the advances that they had and the structures that they had. So these people were ready to absorb this great knowledge that came with Islam and then to reflect on it and to represent it to the Muslim world, and they became the teachers for the Muslims, like we will see. Abu Hanifah was raised in the city of Al-Kufa. His father was a merchant of textiles, and that was the job that actually Abu Hanifah held later on. And his father was well-to-do. He was from a family that is well-to-do, a wealthy family in Al-Kufa, and his father was reported as to be a pious Muslim who had dedicated his life into the Islamic religion. And like we said, he met Ali ibn Abi Talib, prayed to him, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent to Thabit ibn Nu'man, who was the father of Nu'man ibn Thabit. He sent him Abu Hanifah and Nu'man. And when Abu Hanifah was brought up, he went into the traditional thing that is well known at that time, is people will follow the trade of their father. People, they go on, and if your father was a merchant, you become a merchant. If the father was a tailor, you become a tailor. If the father was a goldsmith, you become a goldsmith. People take the trade, father to son to grandson, etc. So Abu Hanifah started working with his father in the textile business. But like most of the children that were brought up at that time, he also had the Islamic knowledge and to go to acquire Islamic knowledge. And he was a bright kid. He was a brilliant person even growing up. And he learned the Quran and he memorized the Quran, and his teacher was Imam Asim, who was one of the seven reciters of Quran, one of the seven qira'at al-sabr. One of them is Imam Asim, and Imam Asim is the one that actually taught Abu Hanifah and Nu'man how to read Quran and how to write, and he memorized the Quran on the hands of Imam Asim. So his knowledge of Quran was very deep and very well taught and very well authenticated. But then Abu Hanifah and Nu'man got busy with the life of a merchant. He was doing the trade in the marketplace, and he used to work with his father, and every now and then he would be in the masjid like really any other person in the city of Al-Kufa, any other layman in the city of Al-Kufa. The city of Al-Kufa at that time was really the capital for knowledge. Many of the great Imams were in that area, and some of them were Imam al-Nakhai, Imam Ibrahim al-Nakhai, Imam al-Sha'bi, and Imam Hammad ibn Sulaiman. So one time, Abu Hanifah al-Nu'man was in the halaqah of Imam al-Sha'bi. And Imam al-Sha'bi was teaching, and he realized the brilliance of this young man in his halaqah, and his intellectual abilities, and his abilities to memorize, his abilities to discuss and debate and argue. And he said, who is your sheikh? Who teaches you? Who is your teacher? He said, إِلَى مَنْ تَحْتَلِفُ? Who do you go to? And Abu Hanifah misunderstood the question. He said, I go to the marketplace. And he said, I go to the marketplace. That's what I do. And the Shafi said, no, that's not what I meant. لم أعني الاختلاف إلى السوق. علمت الاختلاف إلى العلماء. And then who do you go to scholar-wise? And Abu Hanifah said, أنا قليل الاختلاف إليهم. I don't really go to scholars. I'm not a student under any particular scholar. And Shafi looked at him and he said, that's not fair. Don't be mindless. Don't waste your time. You're wasting yourself yourself in the marketplace. He said, لا تغفل عليك بالنظر في العلم. You have to look into the knowledge ومجالسة العلماء and sit with the people of knowledge and scholars. فإني أرى فيك يقظة. I see brilliance in you. وحركة. I see energy in you. He said, you're a waste in the marketplace. What are you doing in the marketplace? You should be under a scholar. And Abu Hanifa said, فوقعت في قلبي قولا. He said, my heart felt his words. The words of Imam Shafi. فتركت الاختلاف يسوع وأخذت في العلم فنفعني الله بقوله. He said, then I left the marketplace, and meaning I left being busy with the marketplace. But we know that Imam Abu Hanifa actually continued to work as a merchant, as a trader of textiles till the end of his life. Rahimahullah. So one thing to know, number one, Abu Hanifa really was attentive, and he accepted the advice of the great scholars of that time, especially Imam Shafi, who really changed the way of the life of Abu Hanifa, and eventually the lives of many millions, but billions of Muslims to follow. And then Abu Hanifa did not take ilm, did not take the knowledge when he was young. When he was very young, he actually took it into his adulthood, into his way beyond his youth. He was actually a professional merchant at that time when he started going and taking knowledge. So it is really also, I think, a hope for all of us that it's never too late to seek knowledge. It's never too late to acquire knowledge and understand our religion. So after that, Abu Hanifa went into ilm. So what did Abu Hanifa do when he went to the school? First, it's like the structure of Islamic knowledge at that time was very well established. And they had specialties. And like what we have to say, this analogy I can give to you, what I'm familiar with, and it is the analogy of medicine. To really become a physician and you specialize, let's say, in neurology, become a nerve doctor, you have to go through years upon years upon years of basic knowledge, of basic understanding of biology and chemistry and physics, and then years for medicine, and then you decide what to specialize in. And the same thing was in the schools of Islamic knowledge at that time. They had to go through basic training. They had to know hadith. They had to know Quran. They had to know Fiqh, jurisprudence. They had to know nahu. They had to know grammar. They had to know Arabic. They had to know all of these things, and then they had to specialize. So Abu Hanifa, according to his own narration, about how did he choose specialty in Fiqh? And I will read the words of Abu Hanifa himself. And this is narrated from his student Abu Yusuf, as we said, he was the most prominent of all his students. He said, كيف وصلت إلى الفقه? How will Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guided you to the study of fiqh, of jurisprudence, of this Islamic knowledge of Sharia? He said, ألما أردت تعلم العلم جعلت العلوم كلها متبعية. He said, I looked for all these branches of knowledge in front of me. I wanted to choose what to specialize in. And then I started reading one art after the other. فقرأت فنا منها. وتفكرت عاقبته وموضع نفعه. I wanted to look into what this knowledge would benefit me and what the end result of me going into this knowledge and this specialty. So I started looking. I said, first, كنت آخذ في الكلام, the knowledge of debate, the knowledge of philosophy, of logic. This is what Abu Hanifa's passion was, of debating people of other religions and debating people who have deviated knowledge of Islam, or many of the groups that were springing up at that time, the Jahmiyyah, Al-Khawarij, Al-Shia, etc. Abu Hanifa wanted just to be a debater, to be a person who would know philosophy, who would know how to debate, and that was known at that time as ilm al-kalam, the knowledge of words. That he can sit down with someone, argue with them, debate with them, and convince them. And he said that was my passion. But however I looked, and I thought the end result of it is not good. Because if I even perfected this knowledge of debate and philosophical argument, then either I will be faced with a lot of animosity. A lot of people don't like argument, and I will be the subject of hate of many groups and many other people. And then the people will start criticizing me, and you will go usually nowhere if you're just a debater. That's just a specialty. However, we will see that during his life he did a lot of that. And even after he became Imam, he debated many go through that. And then he said, and then I looked at art and grammar. And by the way, as the words of Abu Hanifah criticized all these branches, it doesn't mean these branches have less novelty and knowledge or they're not worthy of being seen. It's just the opinion of Abu Hanifah. This is how he chose jurisprudence. And this is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala opens his heart to this knowledge of jurisprudence. He said, I looked into grammar and art, just literature. And then I thought, the end result of it, I will sit down with a boy and teach him grammar. He said, the end result of it, and I will be a teacher of grammar, and I didn't want to do that. And then I looked at poetry, and I wanted to become a poet. And then I looked, and I said, if I have to become a good poet, I have to tell lies. I have to praise people that are not worthy of praise, and I may have to say bad things about people that were not really worthy of that. So he said, I did not like that. And in Arabic there is that saying, أجمل الشعر أكذبه. The most beautiful of poetry is the most false, and the most, one that is filled with lies. Exaggeration is what makes poetry good. And he said, I didn't want to do that. I wanted always to translate the beautiful truth. Then I looked at the qira'at, to transmit the qira'ah of Quran, the recitation of Quran. And I thought the end result of it, I will be a teacher of children to teach them how to recite Quran, which is one of the most noble professions, but that was not what would fulfill the ambition of Abu Hanifah. And then I said, al-hadith, I will be a person of the knowledge of hadith. And then I thought my lifetime is not enough to be good at the knowledge of hadith. And it is really well known from Imam Ahmad when he was asked about the knowledge of hadith, and they asked him, somebody learned 30,000 hadith, would you let him make fatwa? And Imam Ahmad said, no. You absolutely know more to be able to give ruling. So Imam Hanifah said, my lifetime would not be enough. And we remember he started studying later into his life. He said, it's too late for me to learn hadith. And then, after that, he said, then I looked at jurisprudence. Then I looked at Fiqh. فَكُلَّمَا قَبْلَبْتُهُ وَأَدَبْتُهُ لَمْ يَزَّلْ إِلَى جَلَالٍ. The more I look into the jurisprudence, the more I love it. The more I like the end result of it, the more I like what I can do with this knowledge. ورأيت الجلوس مع العلماء والفقهاء والتخلق بأخلاقهم ورأيت أنه لا يستقيم أداء الفرائض وإقامة الدين والتعبد إلا بمعرفته. I thought when you are a student of jurisprudence, you sit with the best of scholars, you sit with the best of the people of knowledge, you debate with them, you learn from them, and then you can't do anything straight, right in your religion without learning jurisprudence. So he said, this knowledge of Fiqh is very important. And I said, that's what I wanted to do. And he said, that's how I went on to learn the knowledge of jurisprudence. And another narration that Abu Hanifah said, how he also went into this knowledge is, first he was a debater. He wanted to go into, like we said, the philosophy and argumentative debates and other things. And he said, most of these events of debating and arguing people or other sects and other religions were in Basra, in the city of Basra. He said, I visited Basra more than 20 times, and I would stay in it just to do this and just to go into these arguments and debates. But then I started pondering upon that, and I said, the scholars that were after the Prophet ﷺ, the companions of the Prophet ﷺ, they had more knowledge than us, and they did not get themselves busy into this just debate. I'm not talking about, somebody attacks and you respond to them. It is about just endless philosophical issues and debates and a lot of this Greek philosophy that was coming into the Muslim world. And they were just these people that were specialized in this, they would spend their entire days on days just arguing and debating and talking about philosophical issues that are mostly abstract. And then he said, when I learned that the people before us did not get themselves busy with that and not get that taking most of their time, I wanted to leave that. And I was saying he said, just learning about it was enough for me. Just I wanted to learn that, but I did not want to practice it. And then another thing, he said, one time I was studying for debate and philosophy. I started having my own halaqah. And it was close to the halaqah of my teacher, Hammad ibn Imam, who inshallah we'll talk about him in a little bit. And then a woman came to me with a question. Here's the shaykh sitting in the masjid and he's having halaqah. And a woman comes to him and he said, tell me about the Sunni divorce. How does divorce happen in Sunnah? Because there is talaq Sunni or talaq bid'i. There is a talaq of Sunnah, there is a talaq of innovation. And most of the divorce that happens in most of the Islamic world, unfortunately today, is talaq bid'i. It's an innovation of divorce. But a woman came to Abu Hanifah and asked him, how do you divorce according to the Sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ? So I didn't know what to answer her, because his knowledge of jurisprudence were not complete, they were not good. And he said, I felt so embarrassed, and I sent one of my students to the halaqah of Imam Hammad to ask the question and to bring the answer, and then he told her that, how to do that, that you have to give the divorce in a period where the man and woman hasn't had any relations, and then you have to wait until later, and then you wait for 2 more periods, etc. And then he could give her the answer. But he felt so inadequate. This is a practical question. He said, here I am, I was talking about abstract, or I'm talking about philosophy, and I'm not benefiting anyone when a Muslim is coming to me with a practical question about how to practice their religion of Islam. I could not answer her. And he said that was the last straw, and after that I went into the study of jurisprudence. So these stories just to tell us about how Abu Hanifah chose the knowledge of jurisprudence and fiqh to become his own specialty. After that, he started going into his scholars, and we will talk about them. And one of the scholars that he went into was Hammad ibn Abi Sulaiman. He stayed with Hammad ibn Abi Sulaiman the longest period of time. And Hammad was a student of Imam al-Nakhai. Now, Imam al-Nakhai, this helps us to understand how the knowledge of Abu Hanifah was developed. Imam al-Nakhai is one of the first scholars that started the school of opinion in the Sharia. If you bring an opinion of a well-learned scholar into the interpretation of the hadith. And the exact opposite of that is what is known as the madhab al-Zahiri. Madhab al-Zahiri actually has survived until today. It's very, very, not very common, but it's still there. That you take the exact text, the exact actual words, and you just stick to it. And there is really a lot of difficulty in that, because you cannot go outside the metaphorical aspect of our religion. Like, for example, when you read Surah Yusuf, you will see how the brothers of Yusuf asked Yaqub, وَاسْأَلِ الْقَرْيَةَ الَّتِي كُنَّا فِيهَا. Ask the village that we were in. How do you ask the village? I mean, how do you go? Meaning you ask the people of the village. But the Al-Zahiriyya would stick to the exact text. There is no interpretation. So the exact opposite of that, the other extreme was the opinion of the school of opinion, which is the school of Imam Nakhai, was transmitted to his student Hammad ibn Sulaiman, and Hammad was the teacher of Imam Abu Hanifah. So Imam Abu Hanifah was greatly influenced by these teachers in the development of his school. Plus, his background in philosophy and debate, argument, makes you understand what kind of a person he is and how he will bring opinion and debate into jurisprudence, into a Sharia, and not only take the wire along, not only take the appearance of the body of the text of any given hadith. And the debate of Abu Hanifah actually did not stop even after he became a jurisprudence mentor and teacher, and then later on the master of this great school. And one of the beautiful stories that is narrated about him is one of his debates to Al-Khawarij. Now, Al-Khawarij, we know who Al-Khawarij are, the people that went out from the army of Ali ibn Abi Talib, and later on they started developing their own madhab, their own school of thought. And one of the things that Al-Khawarij believed in, that مرتكب الكبيرة كافر. Those who commit the capital sin in Islam are kuffar. They are outside the millah. They are not considered Muslims anymore, and they have to go to hell. And there is no other way that they go to hell. And of course, they believe the creed of the people of the Sunnah is protected in kabira. Fasiq is the people that commit the kabair are fasiq, but they're not kafir. And it's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive them, to torment them, and then bring them into paradise. Or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, it's up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala It's not anybody's position to sit there in judgment. But the Khawarij decided that those who commit capital sins are condemned to hell, and they are not of Muslims. So Abu Hanifah one time, just to bring you his background of argumentation and debate into his jurisprudence school, he saw the Khawarij, he heard the Khawarij outside the masjid yelling and shouting and debating on the two funerals that were going on at the same time. So Abu Hanifah got out and they said, here's the problem. One of these funerals are for somebody who was an alcoholic, somebody who was an addict to alcohol, and while he was intoxicated, he was eating and drinking, and he aspirated into his lungs, and he choked, and he died drunk. And the other person was a woman who fornicated and became pregnant, and she killed herself. So not only committed fornication, but also committed the big sin of suicide. And there is the hadith that these people are eventually in hell. So they said, we cannot let them be buried in the grave, in the yards, or in the graveyards or the cemeteries of Muslims. Khawarij would refuse that. And they were ready to fight. They were bringing their swords, and they will not let this funeral come into a Muslim cemetery. So Abu Hanifah, he said, would you debate with me? Can we talk? And they said, we will talk. And they said, well, before these people committed their capital sins, before they committed, what were their religion? Were they Jews? And they said, no. Were they Christians? No. Were they Slavia? No. They said, what kind of religion they were? And they said they were from the people that say, La ilaha illallah, Muhammad Rasulullah, before they committed it. And then he said, so is that 1/4 of the Iman, 1/3 of the Iman, 1/2? What is percentage of faith would you give them before this? Well, how would you say? You are saying now they are not believers, they are kuffar. So before they did it, what do you think? What is their percentage of faith? And they said you cannot divide the faith into halves and quarters and thirds. Faith is faith. He said, so you agree that they were Muslims with faith before they committed these great crimes? And they said, yes, we admit to that. And he said, so why are you asking me if you already admitting that they are people of faith? Why are you arguing their burial in the Muslim cemetery? They said, well, tell us, are they people of hell or people of paradise? And he said, well, you go to the Quran and you will find your answer. And here's the answer. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, and Ibrahim, when he was talking about the people who were kuffar, he said, من تبعني فإنه مني ومن عصاني فإنك غفور رحيم. Those who followed me, they are of me. But those who disobeyed me, you are the all-forgiving and the all-merciful. And what Isa said for people who were even more criminal than them, who gave associates to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he will say, فإن تعذبهم فإنهم عبادك وإن تغفر لهم فإنك أنت العزيز الحكيم. If you torment them, they are your slaves. But if you forgive them, you are the Aziz al-Hakim. So I'm telling them, it's not up to you. The prophets are pleading with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and it's not up to the prophets. So how can you put yourself in charge and tell Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala what he should do with these sinners? And the debate goes on, and it tells you the mind and the sharpness, really, the acuity of the mind of Abu Hanifah.
So where they were buried? Where the body was buried?
The story is they put down their, good question, what happened in the story, the Khawarij put down their swords and they left. And they let the procession go on of these funerals. But his method was not about forcing opinion. His method was about debating, about bringing logic, and about convincing others with his school of thought. And that's how the two schools, how about his love for debate, his love for philosophy, played into the school of Imam Abu Hanifah. So his study and knowledge is again, our next subject, is how he learned. And when Imam al-Sha'bi told him what he told him, he decided to go into the jurisprudence, and one of the great scholars of jurisprudence in Kufa was a man by the name of Hammad ibn Sulaiman. Hammad ibn Sulaiman had great influence on Abu Hanifah. And it is narrated by Abu Hanifah that he said, I have never supplicated for my parents and I let Hammad out. He said, it's my influence of Hammad that every time I pray for my parents, I pray for Hammad. And the son of Abu Hanifah's name is Hammad. He named his son after his great teacher. So Hammad has great influence on Abu Hanifah and Imam. And then he speaks of his relationship to Hammad. And he said, I sat down with him in his halaqah initially when I wanted. And halaqah was basically the university, was the college. The masjid, the mosque in Kufa was the university. And the different colleges were these halaqahs, these little around gatherings of these great imams that were sitting, a lot of knowledge. And he said, I sat down in the halaqah of Hammad and he would start knowing me, and then I started getting closer and closer to him until Hammad said, no one can sit next to me except Abu Hanifah. Immediately his brilliance and his enthusiasm in getting knowledge brought him quite close to his great teacher. And he said, I started absorbing the knowledge of Hammad, started working diligently about the knowledge of Hammad. And how long he stayed with Hammad to know the knowledge of that one person? He said, after 10 years, I felt like I had a lot of knowledge from Hammad. I thought I had all I can get from Hammad bin Sulaiman. So, ثم نازعتني نفسي وحب الرئاسة. He said, my soul, my love for being ahead, my love of being basically the boss, he told me that I should have my own halaqah now. I mean, 10 years is not really a short period in knowledge, and many people don't spend 10 years in seeking knowledge. After 10 years, I thought I should start teaching. I should have my own halaqah. So one day, I made my wudu, and he wanted to go and tell Hammad that I'm going to leave your halaqah now, and I'm going to start my own halaqah in the masjid. And he said, then I sat down in his halaqah, ولم أقل نفسي معتذرا. He felt bad. He couldn't tell his teacher that he won't believe. And he said, and I sat down and I just sat down in his halaqah. But in that particular night, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent this text to Abu Hanifah. A relative of Hammad died in Al-Basra. And Hammad becomes in charge of dividing the inheritance of that person. So Hammad has to go to Basra, and he wanted to assist him. He wanted somebody to cover him while he's in his gone. So he chooses Abu Hanifah. So Abu Hanifah gets his chance to really test his own self. Is he worthy of having his own halaqah or not? And he said, so people started coming to me. Now, halaqah jurisprudence is one of the hardest halaqah, because people come with questions, come with hard questions, and they want rulings, they want answers. So Abu Hanifah sitting there, he said, people come to me, and I would give an answer, except for 60 questions, 60 questions that I was not very sure of my answers. And I started writing down the questions and the answers I gave. And when Hammad came back, I sat down with him and we started debating, one question at a time. And he said, I was right in 40 and I was wrong in 20. And I said, I was wrong 1/3 of the time. 1/3 of the time. And then I made a vow. I will not leave Hammad until he either dies or I die. I will stay in his halaqah until I either die or he dies. And he stayed in his halaqah for 8 more years. So he was a student at the feet of Hammad bin Sulaiman for 18 years. 18 years as Abu Hanifah. So don't think that this is an easy thing. I mean, these people were putting their lives, no complaints, a lot of patience, just for knowledge. 18 years, subhanAllah, if anybody has 18 years of education today, they would really see it that, they would not accept anything less than a very high position anywhere they go. Now, here is Abu Hanifah sitting at the feet of his teacher for 18 years until Hammad died. And only when Hammad died, Abu Hanifah started halaqah. He would not start a halaqah until Hammad died. And when Hammad died, Abu Hanifah's age was 40 years old. So Abu Hanifah started teaching at the age of 40. And that is Islam when somebody reaches his maturity. وَلَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ وَبَلَغَ 40 عَامًا. When somebody reaches the maturity and reaches the age of 40. And that is when, at the age when the Prophet ﷺ was given prophecy, was at the age of 40. And Abu Hanifah started his school at the age of 40. And this halaqah, the halaqah of Hammad, became the halaqah of Abu Hanifah, and that became the source of al-Madhab al-Hanafi. This becomes the However, Abu Hanifa was not only a student of Hammad bin Sulaiman. Abu Hanifa Nu'man was a student of many other scholars. And that happened either during his stay in Al-Kufa, like we said, he sat down in the halqa of Bashar. He learned from An-Nakhai, who are great names in Islamic history and jurisprudence. And then he went to Mecca many times. Abu Hanifa made Hajj 55 times. 55 times he made Hajj. So when he goes to Hajj, he stops where? At Medina. And he gets knowledge from the people of Medina. Then he moves on to Mecca, and he gets knowledge of Mecca. And at the end of the Umayyad time, he became a wanted man from the people of Umayyad. He had to flee Al-Kufa from the oppression of the governor of Al-Kufa. His name was Ibn Ubayrah. We will talk about that. And he left to Mecca. And he would go back between Mecca and Al-Kufa, but he didn't settle back in Al-Kufa until after 6 years into the Khilafah of Rasul. So 6 years he was living in Mecca. And he also learned from the scholars of Mecca. So who did he learn from? How much time do we have? 20 minutes. Okay. So in Mecca, he would take the knowledge from the great scholars of Mecca. And one of the great scholars that was living in Mecca at that time is very well known Thabit. Thabit is, we studied this, the second generation, the best generation after the generation of the Sahaba, and obviously the third generation is the generation we're studying, is the generation of the Imams. We saw Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, خَيْرُ قُرُونِ قَرْنِي ثُمَّ الَّذِي يَلِيهِ ثُمَّ الَّذِي يَلِيهِ. Said the best of times, the best of centuries is mine, and then the one that is after, and the one that is after. And the first generation of Muslims was the generation of the companions of the Prophet ﷺ. The second that took from them was the generation of the the followers of the Sahaba. And then the third generation is the one that we're studying, the generation of the Imams, those leaders that crystallized, reshaped, and organized our Islamic knowledge. So he goes into Mecca and he meets with the Thabit. The Thabit is Afa ibn Abi Rabah. Now we studied a little bit of the aspects of Afa ibn Abi Rabah when we were studying the life of the Tabi'in. But to know about Afa was one of the greatest scholars that were alive at that time. He was a black slave of a woman in Mecca. And by his knowledge he became the scholar of Mecca. And when people would go to Abdullah ibn Umar, Ibn al-Khattab radiallahu anhu, to Medina, ask him questions, Abdullah would send him back. He said, you come to me and you have Afa. You come to me and you have Afa. And I said, you don't need to make the trip. Go ask Afa ibn Abi Rabah. That was the rank, that was the station of Afa ibn Abi Rabah al-Tabi'i. And Abu Hanifa Nu'man had the chance to study at the feet of Afa ibn Abi Rabah. And that made him a direct inheritor of the knowledge of the people that Afa took knowledge from. Who did Afa take knowledge from? Abu Hurairah. Abdullah ibn Umar, Abdullah ibn Abbas, Abdullah ibn Zubayr. And these are the people that Abu Hanifa and Nu'man would take knowledge from. Now, another knowledge that came from An-Nakhai and Hammad is knowledge of Abdullah ibn Mas'ud. So you can see these bright names where all of these great knowledge from these great Sahaba is pouring down into the heart of Abu Hanifa and Nu'man radiallahu anhu. And one time, it is a story that we said when we were reading the life of Afa ibn Abi Rabah, is how Abu Hanifa indirectly learned from Afa ibn Abi Rabah. One time he was in Mecca, and after he finished the ritual of Al-Umrah or Al-Hajj, he wanted to cut his hair right after you finish your Hajj or Umrah. So he went to a barber shop. And in the barber shop, he said, I learned 5 things that I didn't know about jurisprudence from the barber just because Afa ibn Abi Rabah was in Mecca. And these things, when he sat down to perform this, he just wanted to have his hair cut. Now, according to most of us, it's really not an issue. What do you learn at the barber shop? These are what Hanifah could learn at the barber shop. And one time, first he walked in and he asked him, how much do you want for to cut my hair? And then the barber said, this is the ritual of Hajj. You can't argue about the price. Sit down. This is one thing. This is one ruling. You can't argue in the moment of Hajj. What do what, you going to bargain? Well, what am I going to say? Sit down. I'll cut your hair for you. And then he said, I sat down. And then man said, why have to stop in the Qibla? You're sitting down, this is the worship. This is part of Allah. Face the Qibla. And he said, that's the second thing I learned from him. When we do this, you have to face the Qibla. And then I started giving him, I gave him my head to cut it. And he said, give me the right side first. And then he said, that's the third thing I learned from him. And then he started cutting my hair, and I was so ashamed and embarrassed at that time. He's the Imam of the Kufa, and here's this barber teaching him what to do and how to do it, and all these rulings. And then he said, I was so ashamed that I wasn't saying anything, and the man shaking him. He said, why don't you make that clear? You have to make that clear. This is ibadah. And then he said another lesson I learned from him. And then I wanted to go out and then leave after that in embarrassment. And then I said, where are you going? And he said, I'm going to finish my, he said, pray to the house. You have just finished your Umrah. You have to pray to the house after that. He said, another ruling I learned from this barber. And then I asked him and I said, من أين لك ما أمرتني به? How do you learn that? And the man said, didn't you know that we have Abba ibn Rabah in Mecca? This was the Abba ibn Rabah. He was a teacher just for everybody in the marketplace, in the barbershop. And Abu Hanifah could take knowledge directly from this great scholar, Abba ibn Rabah. Another scholar that Abu Hanifah took knowledge from was Zayd ibn Ali ibn Hussein ibn Ali radiallahu anhu. This is Zayd ibn Ali ibn Abidin ibn Hussein. And he sat down with Zayd ibn Ali, and he was a scholar of Qira'at and Quran and jurisprudence. And he also had knowledge from Muhammad al-Baqir ibn Ali ibn Abidin and Ja'far al-Sadiq ibn Muhammad ibn Ali. And these three are known as Imams. They're Imams according to the Sunni tradition. Not only according not to the Shia tradition and the Shia understanding of their Imam, of their leadership and mentorship. They are Sunni leaders, they are Sunni Imams of our creed, of our Aqidah and our Sharia. And Imam Hanifah was able to sit with all three of them. And and actually he also sat with Abdullah ibn Hassan ibn Zayd ibn Hassan ibn Ali, who is the father of the two rebels of the house of Ali, Muhammad ibn Zakiyah and Ibrahim. And he spoke about their rebellion. But actually Abu Hanifah himself would be involved emotionally in these two people that rebelled against Bani Abbas later on, and he was a direct student of their father, Abdullah ibn Hassan. So he took from four people in the house of the Prophet ﷺ, Zayd ibn Ali, Muhammad al-Baqir ibn Ali, Ja'far al-Sadiq ibn Muhammad al-Baqir, and Abdullah ibn Hassan radiallahu anhum ajma'in. And a lot of the influence that he had a lot of loyalty to the house of the Prophet ﷺ, and a lot of recognition to these people. And that will play a major role in his life and a major role in his death. And I will finish with just an account of his first meeting with Muhammad al-Baqir. Muhammad al-Baqir is an Imam. And he was the son of Ali ibn Abidin, who was the son of Hussein ibn Ali ibn Abi Talib. And it is a very beautiful story, and it tells you that Abu Hanifah is not just a man of opinion. It's not only logic that you take this religion into. It's also what we take from a prophet and from the Quran. And the rumor about Abu Hanifah's school at that time is he's a man of philosophy. He's a man of just opinion. And if something does not meet his opinion, then he was rejected. So when he came to meet Muhammad al-Baqir in Medina, Muhammad al-Baqir met him and he asked him, هل أنت الذي غيرت دين جدي? Are you the one that changed the religion of my grandfather, meaning Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? And Abu Hanifah said, Ma'ad Allah. I take refuge in Allah, no, I didn't. And Muhammad said, But how was that? No, you have changed it. That's what Muhammad al-Baqir heard. And Abu Hanifah said, why don't we sit down? So Muhammad al-Baqir wanted to sit and take them. And Abu Hanifah said, no. You sit up and I sit down. He said, اجلس مكانك كما يحق لك. Your position is up, and my position is to sit down in front of you at your feet. حتى أجلس كما يحق لي. فإن لك عندي حرمة كحرمة جدك في حياته على أصحابه. sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He said, you have the position of your grandfather among his companions when it comes to you and me. He said, that's how I have to respect you. So he sat down, under him, right under his feet, and then he said, let me ask you a few things. Abu Hanifah is speaking to Muhammad Bashar. He said, الرجل أضعف أم المرأة? Who is weaker, man or a woman? And Muhammad Bashar said, no, the woman is weaker. And he said, then, if it is a matter of opinion, he said, well, isn't the woman have two shares? One share in the inheritance, and the man has two shares in the inheritance. When you divide the inheritance among the heirs, the man gets two shares, and the woman gets one share. And he said, yes. Muhammad Bashar said, yes. And Abu Hanifah said, this is my opinion, this is my madhab, this is my school. And if it is up to the opinion, then the woman should get more money because she is a weaker. And he said, this is not about opinion, as long as there is a solid thing. And then he said, الصلاة أفضل أم الصوم? Which is more important, Salah or Sawm? And Muhammad Bashar said, Salah, of course. Salah comes first, always more recommended. Both are obviously pillars of Islam, but Salah is more important. And then he said, وَهَذَا قَوْلُ جَدِّكَ وَهَذَا مَذْهَبِي. This is the words of your grandfather, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and it is my school. And he said, if it is about opinion, then when the woman cleans herself after her period, then she should make up for Salah. She does make up for Qiyam, which is less important. But if it is all about logic and just what we think is right, then we should ask the woman to make up prayer, not to make up fasting, because prayer is more important than fasting. But my madhab is not about opinion. It's about what the Prophet ﷺ said. And then he said, al-bawlu, ajazakumullah. And urine is dirtier or semen? And it's well known that you cannot pray to have urine on your clothes, but you can just rub the semen off your clothes and you can play with it. So the urine is a lot more dirtier, has a lot of more, and it's a lot dirtier than semen itself. And then he said that of course, urine is worse. And then he said, if it is about opinion, then I would order people to make ghusl when they urinate and to make wudu when they get semen out. If the semen is better than urine and if it's a matter of logic, then I would reverse it. And he said, Ma'adallah, and muhawwila deen jadid. I asked the future of Allah that I would change the religion of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and then Muhammad Bashar hugged him and kissed his face after he heard these things, and he knew that it's not about what the rumors about Abu Hanifah. By the way, these rumors continued on till after the death of Abu Hanifah. It's just a man of opinion that whatever makes sense he takes, and if it doesn't make sense he rejects. And we know that Islam is about submission, like Sheikh Mas'ud told us just a few nights ago. It's not all the things that just make sense to us have to be part of our religion. Ali ibn Abi Talib said, and Islam makes sense, but a lot of things we're not really smart enough to understand and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala plans on. And Ali ibn Abi Talib said, though, كان الدين بالعقل. If religion was about just common sense, then when we make wudu and we were wearing the khuf, then we should wipe the bottom of it, not the top of it, because that's the dirty part. It is all about obedience, about following Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and submitting to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and trusting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in our religion. I will stop here, inshallah, and we will continue. It's okay with everybody, Dr. Zaman and Imam Mas'ud. We want to have a session next Sunday, the weekend of Eid. It's up to you. I'm ready, inshallah, I can do it. If you all want to, or if you want to take off during the weekend of Eid, it's up to you. I felt like we had and how he became who he was. What are the things that made Abu Hanifah the great Imam in our history, in our jurisprudence? And inshallah, we'll continue that next session, Sunday on 6:45. جزاكم الله خير. صلى الله العظيم أن يغفر لنا ذنوبنا وأن يقبل أعمالنا في هذه الأيام الأولى من ذي الحجة. These are the first 10 days of the Hijjah, one of the most blessed days, one of the most important days of the year. And inshallah, we will not waste our days or our nights during this time and